So, good evening to everyone, and we will start. But before we start our talk about Hebrew manuscripts, we need two short introductions to the subject itself. The first introduction is concerning to the title, Medieval Hebrew Manuscripts. Medieval. Talking to our issue, we have to admit that we are talking about the period from the first dated Hebrew manuscripts till the period when printed book displaced the book written by hand. In other words, from the beginning of the 10th century till the middle of the 16th century. Hebrew. Hebrew, in this context, refers to manuscripts of any subject in any language, but written in Hebrew characters. This graphic criterion for this body of manuscripts is common in contemporary paleography and codicology. Manuscripts. As you know, the oldest form of the book is scroll. The shape of scroll was changed to the form of codex approximately in the 7th or 8th century. However, in Jewish culture, scrolls with biblical text are in use till today, in the synagogue liturgy, for example, but not as a repository of the new text or new data. From about 7th or 8th century, all kinds of books were written in the form of codex. So let's summarize our data. We are talking about collection of codices written in Hebrew letters during the period from the 10th till the middle of 16th century. Second, we need a very brief introduction to the history of the Russian Jewry. We need such kind of survey for better understanding the process of collecting and further forming of the Jewish funds in Russia. If we put aside the details, we can note that Russia was an extremely isolated state until the time of the Tsar Peter the Great. Ruled Russia from the year 1682 until his death in the year 1725. And the country was totally free of Jews, Judenfrei, even in his time and further. The situation changed dramatically during the period of the Empress Catherine the Great, ruled Russia for 34 years from the 1762 until her death in 96. During her reign, the land of the empire was expanded. The population of the new lands, including Jews, became Russian citizens. We should note two very important historical events connected to the Jewish population. The first one, 3 partitions of Poland. The first of 1771, the second of 1793, and the last of the 1795. Due to this historical process, the Russian Empire, within about only 25 years, turned from a country without Jews into one with the biggest Jewish Ashkenazi population in the world. We don't have the exact data concerning the Jewish population at that period, but different scholars mention from 500 to 800,000, from, let's say, from 500,000 until the million. At that time, so-called Pale of Settlement was formed, which means that special parts of the country where Jews could live and trade freely were established, and Ashkenazi Jews suffered double taxation. So Ashkenazi Jews got, in fact, a status of special suppressed people. The second one is the addition of the Crimea Peninsula to Russia in the year 1783. However, the most important collection of Hebrew manuscripts kept in Russia bring us back to this historical event. The Crimea is undoubtedly one of the most interesting from historical point of view acquisitions of Russian Empire. It is an ancient land which saw Greeks, Romans, Khazars, Mongols, Turks, and so on. Two main Jewish communities, Krimchaks and Karaites, existed in the Crimea. Krimchaks practiced normative rabbinical Judaism. By the end of the 18th century, Karasubazar, Belogorsk of today, was the main center of Krimchak community in the Crimea. And Karaites are the Jews that deny Talmudic tradition and remain devoted to the biblical Judaism. We can call them sons of the Bible, Bnei Mikra in Hebrew. A split between rabbinical Jews and Karaites happened in Baghdad in the beginning of the 8th century. But the Crimean Karaites themselves thought differently. Just keep this fact in mind. Now let's pass to the main topic. Jewish funds of libraries in the dark Soviet period of Russian history were practically closed for researchers. Their study began with the fall of the Iron Curtain in the late 80s of the last century and continues to these days. Here a small but long summary of these 30 years, which deals with only one discipline, the study of medieval Hebrew book from the paleographical and codicological point of view. I will mark only world records here, and it's a long list. The earliest dated Hebrew manuscript in the world. I mean very famous manuscript of prophets, dated the year 916. We will discuss it and its discovery in details a bit later. The earliest dated manuscripts of some areas, like Palestine, Jerusalem, 988, Syria and Lebanon, Tsur, 1091, Egypt, Fustat, 1008 or 1010. This is a famous Leningrad Codex, and it is 200 years older than the second dated manuscript of this area. Yemen, Aden, 1144, 80 years older than the second dated manuscript. Spain, Valencia, 1190, first on paper, 110 years older than the rest paper manuscript we know today from this area. Algeria, Tlemcen, 1225, extremely rare and interesting manuscript. Tunisia, Kairouan, 1046, 300 years older than other dated manuscripts from Tunisia. Byzantium, Gagra, 1207, 100 years older than other Byzantine dated manuscripts. Iran, Basra, 921, 341 years older than the next known dated manuscript. The earliest dated manuscripts that was written in the Holy Land by the immigrants from Maghreb and Spain. The earliest dated manuscript that was written by several scribes. The earliest dated manuscript that was written for public use. The earliest dated manuscript that was written with a numbering of choirs and catchwords. The earliest dated illuminated manuscript, and so on. So you can see yourself how extremely important was the fall of the Iron Curtain for the development of Hebrew manuscript culture. How did these unique treasures end up in Russia, in which there were no Jews in the Middle Ages, and especially in St. Petersburg, which was closed to Jews with some exceptions until the Revolution of February 1917? Strangely enough, but the history of the formation of these collections is directly related to the Russian Jewish history in general. So let's go back to the Crimea again. We don't know exactly when Karaites Jews came to the Crimea. Most probably, Karaites appeared there shortly after the peninsula was captured by Tatars in 1239. It should be noted that the first real evidence concerning Karaites dates back to 1278. It is a discussion with rabbinical Jews concerning some calendar data. It is important to emphasize that the Crimea was the only place on the Jewish map where Karaite communities were much bigger than the rabbinical one. The acquisition of the Crimea by Russia demanded to adopt a new administrative status for all the new people, including Jews. The easiest way could be to put Karaites under the same law which regulated the life of the Ashkenazi Jews in European part of Russia. It didn't fit the ideas of Karaites leaders. They began a long procedure to getting a special status for them, different from that of rabbinical Jews. The most important stage in the process of separating from the rabbinical Jews was the development of a concept of their own history of the Crimean Karaites, in which they present themselves as a part of ancient, unique population of Crimea, inhabiting the peninsula from the times of the Persian Tsar Cambyses. It's the 6th century before Common Era. They insisted that they had nothing to do with Judeo-Christian conflict. Two ideas follow this. First one, the Karaites were not in the Holy Land when Christ was crucified, and his blood does not lie on them. Second, the Karaites do not recognize the Talmud, and the Bible is a holy book for both, for Christians and for Karaites. In other words, there is no reason to oppress Karaites and equate them with the Jews of Talmud. All these ideas led to the fact that in 1839, the Karaites received an official request from the authorities that they must prove the antiquity of their stay in Crimea. The answers of these fateful questions were entrusted to the hero of our saga, Abraham ben Samuel Firkovich, was born in 1787 and died in 1874. Please show the illustration number 4, Tamar. Bruria, now we need the illustration number 4. Where is, okay. Please look at him. He is my hero and your hero in these two lectures also. And keep it on the screen, please. So Abraham Firkovich, spiritual leader of his sect and falsifier of the Jewish history, ideological enemy of rabbinical Jews and polemical writer, editor, publisher, and archaeologist. He is probably the most famous Karaite leader of the 19th century. However, first of all, he was an obsessive collector. During his long life, Firkovich managed to collect the probably biggest private collection of Hebrew and Samaritan manuscripts in the world. We are not going to discuss his biography in details. It is worth special lecture, and you can find his biography by yourself, for example, in Encyclopedia Judaica. He knew what he wanted to find before he started his journey. He wanted to find old books and old graves which could provide him with a clue and will prove the early dates of Karaite settlement in the Crimea. His journey in search of Karaite antiquities started in September 1839 and ended in the beginning of 1841. It covered the territory of the Crimea and Northern Caucasus. He had an unlimited budget and a powerful argument, official letter to all local governments to help him and to fulfill his requests. He was a very clever and quick-minded man, and he understood very quickly that there were no ancient documents with the data he needed. And he started to rewrite Jewish history and create his own history. He made a complex system of falsification of material evidence. He falsificated the inscription in tombstones. He created 3 new eras for Jews: Legalutenu, era that starts in the year 696, for Livriata Olam, which started in another time, and the Matarchi era. Matarchi era, it's an era from the very old city of Taman. And he started to change inscriptions in manuscripts, to change letters, for example, one letter to another letter, and to calculate in another way the dates, to make acrostichons, and to make new inscriptions near the old one, or to add something like Karaite names or names of the cities of Crimea near the old manuscripts. What's important for us, we have to understand that he never changed the text itself in the manuscript, only some additions. So for researchers of the text, it was very Firkovich, his name. It was not, not so bad what he did. The most important thing in his search of Firkovich was that he was able to open the genesis of all the synagogue and pull out the materials hidden there. They were mostly Bible manuscripts and scrolls. His most important discovery was the so-called Babylonian Codex. Please, illustration number 1. Oh, great. Thank you very much. Thanks. So this is a codex of late prophets with Babylonian vocalization, with Masora Magna and Masora Parva, I mean the commentary. No place, probably it was written in Iran, and it was written for Chacham ben Yehuda. In the you can see it's very easy to read it in the second column on the first line. Suyam ze hadifter bechodesh Tishrei bishnat 1228 shanim. It means Chodesh Tishrei according to the era of contracts. If we switch it to common era, it's September, October 916. It has 223 folio and written on parchment. The story of the discovery of this truly unique manuscript in the old Karaite synagogue in Chufut-Kaleh in Crimea is described in details by Firkovich himself in the preface for his book Avnei Zikaron, Memorial Stones. He wrote, I was talking to the shamash of the synagogue and I noticed a small hole in the floor. This hole was covered with a board. I pushed it aside and looked inside. There was one large and very old book wrapped in a silk parochet curtain. I took out this book and saw that it was the book of the later prophets written on parchment. According to this remark, the manuscript was not known to anyone. However, Firkovich's biographer, Ephraim Deinert, in his travel notes on the Crimea, describing this synagogue, made the following comment. In this prayer house, under the floor, Firkovich found the book of the prophets on parchment with Babylonian vocalization and cantillations. This is despite the fact that the Karaites had already told Professor Muzrakevich about it in 1836. But it is not for me and not here to deal with the analysis of Firkovich's stories and wonders. For us, it's not so important the place where he found it, but till today, this book is not only the oldest dated Hebrew manuscript in the world, but also the most complete version of Babylonian vocalization that we know today. And it is a basis of the philological research of Babylonian vocalization for everyone. Now it is in the Russian National Library and the sigle is Hebrew Ivr 1b3. Here you can see the colophon. Colophon, it means, it's a Greek word, means the text of the scribe himself, where he put some data about the place or time or or whatever, blessing for the god for finishing his writings. And near the colophon, you can see some older marks. Look at these traces of glue on the bottom. You can see it right here. Absolutely. Here is one of Firkovich's main methods of the doctoring of the manuscript. He covered the leaf with glue and explained it this way. The text is hard to make out. I cover the leaf with glue and it becomes very legible. For some time, I copied the information. Then the glue thickens and the text becomes unreadable, but the information is already taken down. But as you understand, the truth was the opposite. He covered the leaf with glue in order to hide his forgery. Today it may be easily seen in ultraviolet rays. Now we don't know why he did it, because the date you can read easily. Probably he did it to put some Karaite names and to connect this really very old manuscript with the places of Karaite history in the Crimea Peninsula. After his journey in Crimea and the Caucasus, in the year 1841, Firkovich brought to Odessa to Society for History and Antiquities 44 selected manuscripts. It contained 15 scrolls, 20 biblical codices, and 9 non-biblical codices. The society invited outstanding German Hebraist Ephraim Piner to prepare a catalogue of it. When the description was already finished, Firkovich came to Odessa with only one manuscript in his hand. This manuscript is until today probably the most important Hebrew manuscript in the world, the famous manuscript of the whole Bible. It was written in Cairo in the beginning of the 11th century. It was a great surprise for everyone, and Firkovich never explained it where he had got it. The provenance of this fantastic manuscript is still a mystery. This is a splendid, richly illuminated, big volume in extremely good physical condition, known today as Codex Petropolitanus or Leningrad Codex. This manuscript is a basis of every scholarly edition of Hebrew Bible, Biblia Hebraica. It contains 491 leaves. It has 8 colophons, 6 of them are decorated. The manuscript written on parchment, every quire has 5 sheets. Please show us illustration 2 bis. Yes, thank you. So this is a 460 verse from the book of Leviticus, from the manuscript. And this is just an example how it looks like. You can see that it is written in 3 columns, 27 lines in every column, And the Masora Magna in the 3 lines you can see here, and probably 3 lines in the end, yes. And Masora, a little Masora Parva in between the columns. You can see the graphic elements here, and it's very interesting. You can see the graphic elements at the end of lines, for example, here or here or here, graphic elements, yes. So they want just to fill up the line with graphic. It's written in a very good ink, so it's absolutely readable today. It's as I said, it's absolutely in a great condition. You can read it like it was written some years ago. The name of the scribe and the owner we can see in a very famous colophon that is written inside the geometrical figure as a 6-finger star like Magen David. Illustration number 2, please. So you can see, Ani Shmuel ben Yaakov כתבתי וניקדתי ומיסרתי זה המצחף לכבוד רבנה מבורך הכהן בן יוסף הידוע בן אסדת יברכהו חי. So Shmuel ben Yaakov is a scribe. He copied, made a vocalization, and wrote the Masoretic notes for this manuscript. Mitzhaf is a medieval word for codex in medieval Hebrew. And it was written for the Rav Mevorach HaKohen ben Yosef, that was well known as Ben Asdat. So this is a very, very famous folio of this manuscript. On the folio 1 recta that we are not going to see right now, we have long colophon with the date of the manuscript. The date is marked in this colophon 5 times in 5 different systems. From the creation of the world, from the captivity of the king Jehoiachim, according to the Seleucid era, from the destruction of the temple, according to the Hijra Muslim era. The problem is that they are not correspondent each other. However, to make the long story short, it is a period from 1008 to 1013. So approximately we can say that it was written on 1010, let's say. Now I would like to show you one more example of biblical text that was corrected by Firkovich. This is the last folio of the Pentateuch with long dedication to the order of the book. Illustration 5, please. And now, please, we need the last line of it. Yes. You can see here we can read Zoshnat Retzon Yotzer Olamim Baruch Adonai Leolam Amen ve'Amen. If we will look at it carefully, you can pay attention that the first 2 words, Zoshnat, are written a little bit in a different way. So probably Firkovich changed this. I mean, and you can see the dots. Yeah? You can see text with dots. If you count letters, you will get, oh, sorry, something bad here. Something bad. Just a second, please. So if you count this text, you will get the number 848. It means the year 4848 from the creation, or the year 1088 Common Era. Now we understand that this is a falsification. Why we understand it? First of all, we know that in Orient, today we know it. Firkovich, of course, didn't know it. But today we know that in the Orient, using dots for counting started only in 14 or 15 century, not in the 11th century for sure. Second, we know that the counting like this with chronogram, we call for this idea chronogram. Chronogram should be the citation from the Holy Bible. And here is just a very nice phrase, blessed by the Lord forever, but it is not the citation from the Bible. So it is just impossible to make it in 11th century and in this way. And we can see that the Shnat, the beginning of this text, it's a really something wrong with it. The joke is that Firkovich didn't know that here is a really very old manuscript, probably older than the date that he wanted to put here. So our hero emptied all the genesis of Crimea and came with all these treasures, firstly to Odessa and later on to St. Petersburg. And he wanted to sell these treasures to the state Imperial Public Library in St. Petersburg. It took many years for the library to get to decision to buy it. And the commission, the experts of the library understood immediately that something not normal with some of manuscripts. They understood that Firkovich made changes in manuscripts, but they also understood that he didn't touch the text, and it was very important for them to get such a library. He wanted an amazing sum of money. He asked for 200,000 silver rubles. 200. You have to understand that the year budget of the library was 10,000. He wanted something absolutely amazing sum. And the Russian Tsar Alexander II decided to buy this collection for the library from his own money. And he did it first of all because he wanted to have the collection of biblical manuscripts in St. Petersburg. So in 1862, Firkovich sold his collection to the Imperial Public Library for a sum of 125,000 silver rubles. This is equal to about $2 million of today, but manuscripts were much cheaper back then. And year after that, in the year 1863, Karaites got the equal rights with the Christians. This is the end of the story from the political point of view, but not the end of Firkovich's saga as a collector. If you join us in the next talk, we will continue to talk about his collection. Now, if we have about 5 or 10 minutes more, I would like to read you a short description how he came to one of Crimea's Geniza, how he did it in the Geniza of the city Karasubazar that I mentioned, the Geniza of the Krimchaks, just to make an expression to understand the way of his behavior with manuscripts and with the people. On Monday, the 28th of Tishrei, the year 5600, at noon, I entered the town of Karasubazar. And in the morning, I went to the synagogue, to the Crimean rabbinicals. And I left it, and I went to the Beit Midrash, and joined to that synagogue, and saw that it was filled with people. And I looked attentively at the northern wall, and noticed that it was made on unburned bricks, and the distance between it and the synagogue wall was equal to 2 elbows. And I asked the Melamed, why don't you remove the wall between the Midrash and the synagogue in order to extend it and to create more space for your children? And suddenly the Melamed blurted out that it was because worn out, useless, and tattered books are hidden between these 2 walls. At these walls my heart sank, and I summoned the community's fathers and asked their permission to open the Geniza for me. But they answered that they didn't have the right to open it under the circumstance, as it was put under the strict herem ban. But I told them, don't be afraid of the prohibition, and no misfortune will befall you, because you haven't opened it, the Geniza, by your own request, but by order of the highest officials of the Tsar, as demanded in the open list entrusted to me by the governor. And I took it and read it to them. Nothing that my words had no effect. I told them that in that case, I must go to the police and inform them about the prohibition that they were afraid of violating. And I immediately went to the town head and met with the solicitor and police officer, and gave the solicitor the open list. And when he read that the open list was written on behalf of the Count Vorontsov, very important person, they left their seats, took 2 Tatarian foremen, and the 3 of them came with me to the synagogue. Before our arrival at the synagogue, a crowd of Jews, Krimchaks and Ashkenazi Jews, had gathered there as if ready for war. And I took a hammer and struck the western wall with it, and easily made a hole like a window, because the wall was only 6 vershok wide, and nothing happened to me. Then the policemen were ordered by the town head to take the instrument and open up the bottom half of the wall. And there was a Geniza filled with fragments and different books, enough to fill up several carts. And the Jewish elders were shuddering with sobs and tearing, and their births. And they said, whatever hasn't seen the destruction of the temple will see our perdition. So only in one place, you can see, he took some hundreds of fragments, Torah scrolls, and manuscripts. And if we are talking about especially biblical manuscripts, I would say that before we started the research of libraries in Russia, in St. Petersburg, we knew 20 biblical manuscripts that we saw that they might be from 10th to 12th century. But only in this one library, Imperial, today it's National Library of Russia, they have 200 manuscripts like this, 20 in the whole world and 200 in one library. And to finish up our session of today, just the last example. In 1997, the catalog of dated Hebrew manuscripts till the year 1020 was published. And it was a joint work of 3 academies of science, Russia, Israel, and France. So all 5 of the preserved codices and 6 of the 10 manuscripts, fragments, belongs to the collection of the Russian National Library. 5 from 5. This is the end of my talk of today. Thank you for your attention. And next talk I will dedicate to another topics of this collection. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Iakerson. I think the story you presented is unknown to many people in our audience. So thanks for giving us all this information. I'll try and see which questions we have in the chat. Robert wants to know, how did the manuscripts from so many places wind up in Crimea in the first place?
Okay, there is no one, I know one answer. We have very, very interesting manuscript of the whole Bible, not from the 13th century. It was written in Damascus in 1280. It's also very rare manuscript of the Bible in the Institute of Oriental Manuscripts. And in this Bible, we have a very important document, an agreement between the old Karaite community of Damascus and the community of Karaite people in Crimea. And the idea of this agreement, we don't have money to keep our treasures today. We are old people, we are only 5 people, and we just cannot keep our manuscripts. We ask you to take our manuscripts to Crimea and to pay for our places in Beit Avot in the Holy Land. So this is one way. They sent a lot of manuscripts to Crimea from the places in the Middle East, in Damascus or Egypt or something like this. After that, they have a very intensive exchange between Karaites people, and Karaites were especially interested in the Bible manuscripts. And Crimea was in an 18th and 19th century, probably the only one place in the world that the Karaites community was bigger than rabbinical community and much, much more richer. They have possibilities to get it. This is the only one answer. But for example, Firkovich was a genius, you know. For example, he visited the Holy Land before He came made a Hajj, Aliyah Regel, for Jerusalem, and he took some very rare manuscripts with him to Crimea, and he stopped by customer, and they didn't want him to take out holy books from Holy Land, because it was forbidden from Jewish, point of view. And he said, but it is not right. I am allowed to do it because in Isaiah you can read Kimitzion Tetze Torah. So Torah will get out from Zion. And he took books like this. So he had a lot of tricks, how to get it.
Well, I'm sure we all appreciate the fact that there are people who kept the manuscripts for all of us. There are many comments in the chat thanking you for the lecture. I don't see any more questions. If someone has, this is the time. And there are questions about the recording. Some people would like to watch again your lecture. So you will be sent a link in a few days. There is another question here. How did the Crimean Riots have so much money compared to those in other countries?
It was very rich community. They had a lot of trades, and when Russia came to Crimea, they were in a Russian side, so they got a rights to make. So they were not limited like Ashkenazi Jews. They can make trades all over the Russia, and it was a rich community. I don't know how to explain it. A lot of how they came to Karaites. They have some centers. They were in a Baghdad. After they moved to the Holy Land. They moved to Sepharad, to Spain. After that, they moved to Constantinople, and from Constantinople, they moved to Crimea, because Crimea was a part of the Ottoman Empire in this time, and it's another story about Firkovich. Manuscripts, it's okay, I would say, because you change only dates or something, but he changed a lot in an inscription in a cemetery, in tombstones, and he tried to change the history and make the idea that Khazars were Karaites. It's a very long story, but here we are. They still, for example, now they have a museum for Karaites culture in Crimea, and I visited this museum, and they still have a Karaite cemetery with all these tombstones that Matzevot that he changed names and changed dates in it. And they really rewrite the history, and today they believe in it. They believe that they are not Jews. For example, do you know why Magen David has 6 heads? You don't know. In the Museum of Karaite History, they can explain it, because the main Karaite tefillah, the main Karaite song is Shema Israel Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. This is 6. And it's you are just going and hearing stories, and from Karaites, they are ancient religion. From Karaites religion came Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It's very simple. They really did another history for themselves, and they believe in it. You can if you believe it, you are.
You're part of the belief. Let's take another question.
I don't hear you.
Oh, let's take another question or two. Terry would like to know what he did with all the money he got for selling the manuscripts.
Absolutely great question. This is our next talk, what he did with his money.
Okay, so everyone, you better join us next week. And let's take the last question from Anna. Are there any Karaites in Crimea today?
Yeah. They have a community. They
marry each other?
Hmm?
Do they try and marry each other? Is it a community that tries to survive?
Yeah, it's a small community. I don't know, some hundreds people, and we have community of we have 2 communities in Lithuania and in Crimea. They have the museum, they have a synagogue, and they have how to say, yes, yeah. They don't like Jewish people to come to their cemetery, because I used to come every summer to the cemetery with students to make the epigraphic works, to make a description of all these tombs. They didn't like us, but here we are.
Okay, I think we'll a few more questions. Maybe should we take the last question from Steve? Are there any correct scholars who are trained in manuscript history and have, I guess you're following the question with me, and have wrestled with harmonizing the history according to the communal fabrication with the history according to academia?
No, it's two different stories. For example, if you will go just to Wikipedia to read about Karaites, but in Wikipedia, not in a serious research book, you will read that they are Turkish people from Tatarian, speaks Tatarian and etc. No, it's absolutely two different ways. And in Russia, for example, in Russia, researchers, Israeli school for sure knows the difference between Karaites and how it was and the real data. But in Russia, a lot of researchers till today think that Karaites, it's really separate people. They are not Jews and they have their own history.